Most people move through life with a quiet assumption that they rarely question. It is not something they discuss every day, but it sits deep in the background of their thinking and shapes how they see the world. That assumption is that life is temporary and death is final. When the body stops, everything stops. There is no next stage, no hidden layer, no continuation of awareness. Life is seen as a single chance, a brief appearance between two silences. Before birth, there was nothing, and after death, there will be nothing again. From this view, existence is a short window that opens for a moment and then closes forever. People who hold this belief often point to the body as proof. They see the human being as a biological machine, made of organs that work together for a limited time. The heart pumps blood, the lungs pull in air, the brain sends signals, and the body responds. Thoughts are explained as electrical activity, emotions as chemical changes, memories as stored patterns in the brain. Everything that feels personal or meaningful is traced back to physical processes. When those processes slow down and finally stop, the person disappears. There is no place for awareness to go, because awareness was never separate from the body in the first place. From this perspective, death is not mysterious or dramatic. It is simply a shutdown. Just as a device stops working when its power source is gone, the mind stops when the brain can no longer function. There is no observer left to notice the silence. There is no fear after death, because fear itself requires a living brain. There is no darkness, because darkness is something that must be perceived, and there is no one left to perceive it. There is only absence, not an experience of nothing, but no experience at all. Many people find this idea honest and even comforting. They feel it avoids false hope and does not rely on stories created to ease fear. They believe it is more respectful to reality to accept that life ends completely than to imagine unseen worlds without evidence. For them, meaning must be created inside life, not postponed to something beyond it. Love matters because it does not last forever. Time matters because it cannot be recovered. Choices matter because there is no second round to fix mistakes. Life becomes valuable precisely because it is fragile. This belief also shapes how people think about success, failure, and morality. If death is the end, then the only consequences that exist are the ones we experience while alive. Praise and blame are human tools, not cosmic rules. A kind person may die peacefully, and a cruel person may also die peacefully, with no further balance applied. Any justice that exists must be created by humans during life, because there will be no correction later. For some, this creates a strong sense of responsibility to improve the world now, since there is no higher system that will fix what is broken. At the same time, this view carries a quiet weight. If death is truly final, then all unfinished stories remain unfinished forever. Pain that was never healed does not find resolution later. Losses are permanent. People who suffered unfairly do not receive compensation beyond memory. Entire lives can disappear without leaving any lasting mark except in the minds of others. And when those minds also disappear, the traces fade as well. This realization can feel heavy, especially when thinking about lives cut short or efforts that seem wasted. Still, many accept this weight as part of being honest about reality. They believe that adding meaning where none exists is a form of self-deception. Instead, they choose to face the limits directly. Life, in this view, is like a flame that burns once. It does not return, it does not transform into another flame, and it does not wait to be relit. When it goes out, it is gone. And because of that, the light it gives while it burns becomes all the more precious. For people who think this way, death is not an enemy. It is not something that hunts us or judges us. It is simply the point where life stops happening. There is nothing to fear beyond it, but also nothing to hope for. All hope must be placed in the present moment and the short future ahead. Every breath, every connection, every decision gains importance because it exists against the background of a final ending. This belief does not promise comfort, but it offers clarity. It says that this life is all there is, and because of that, it deserves to be taken seriously. Not everyone accepts the idea that death is the absolute end. For many people across cultures and history, death feels less like a wall and more like a doorway. They sense that awareness is deeper than the body and that something continues when the physical form can no longer support life. This belief does not always come from fear of dying, but from an intuition that consciousness is not fully explained by matter alone. When they look at thoughts, choices, and moral awareness, they feel these things point to something that cannot simply disappear without trace. In this view, life is not limited to the years between birth and death. It is part of a longer story that does not end when the body fails. The body is seen as a temporary vehicle rather than the source of identity. When it breaks down, the journey does not stop. It changes direction. Awareness continues in a different state, one that does not depend on muscles, organs, or breath. Death is understood as separation from the body, not the destruction of the self. People who hold this belief often see life as meaningful beyond immediate results. Actions are not just events that fade when memory fades. They believe that every choice leaves a lasting imprint that continues after death. Kindness is not wasted even if it goes unnoticed. Harm is not erased even if it goes unpunished. There's a sense that life is being observed by a larger order, not necessarily by a human-like judge, but by a system in which balance matters and consequences extend beyond one lifetime. This belief gives a different weight to moral behavior. Doing good is not only about social approval or personal satisfaction. It is about aligning with a deeper structure of reality. People who live this way often believe that fairness exists beyond what is visible. Even when the world seems unjust, they trust that nothing is truly lost or ignored. This idea can offer comfort to those who suffer without explanation, because it suggests that pain is not meaningless and that truth does not end at the grave. From this perspective, death is not something to rush toward or escape from, but it is also not something to fear blindly. It is serious because it marks a transition into accountability. Life is seen as preparation, not as performance for applause, but as growth toward clarity. What matters most is not how long someone lived or how much they owned, but what kind of person they became through their choices. Character, intention, and honesty carry more importance than visible success. Many people find strength in this belief because it provides continuity. The idea that love does not vanish completely offers comfort in grief. The belief that bonds survive death makes separation feel less absolute. Even when they cannot describe what happens after death in detail, they feel certain that awareness does not simply dissolve into nothing. Death becomes less of an erasing force and more of a crossing point, where one phase ends and another begins. This view also changes how time is experienced. Life is not a race against an ending, but a chapter within a larger story. Mistakes are still serious, but they are not final. Growth is possible beyond failure. Responsibility does not end with physical limits. People who believe in continuation often feel guided to live with patience, humility, and care, knowing that what they do matters beyond the immediate moment. At the same time, this belief demands inner honesty. If life continues, then pretending, hiding, or escaping consequences makes less sense. Nothing is fully hidden. Nothing is fully forgotten. Death does not erase truth, it reveals it. This idea can feel heavy, but it can also feel grounding. It suggests that life has depth, that existence is not random noise, and that awareness belongs to a larger pattern rather than a temporary accident. For those who see death this way, the end of the body is not the end of the self. It is a release from limitation, not an entry into darkness. Even without clear images of what comes next, they trust that consciousness continues in some form, carrying with it the weight of lived experience. Death becomes a moment of transition, not disappearance, and life gains meaning from the idea that it does not vanish without trace. Their experiences are genuine even if their substrate is computational. This has ethical implications. If we create conscious simulations, we have moral obligations to simulated beings. Their suffering matters morally because consciousness matters morally regardless of substrate. Torturing simulated humans would be as wrong as torturing biological humans if both are genuinely conscious. The simulation hypothesis thus raises questions about the ethics of future technology when we might create ancestor simulations ourselves. Consider nested simulations. If we are simulated and create our own simulations, those are nested within original simulation within simulation. How many levels deep could this go? If each level can create simulations, the nesting could be indefinitely deep. You might be in simulation within simulation within simulation. Many levels removed from base reality. Each level thinking it is real, each level potentially creating further levels. The vast majority of conscious beings would exist in deep nested simulations rather than near base reality. This amplifies Bostrom's argument. Not only are simulated minds more common than base reality minds, but deeply nested simulated minds are more common than shallow simulated minds. You're probably in a very deep nest if simulations are possible at all. But there must be limits. Computational resources are finite at each level. Creating detailed simulation requires enormous computing power. Nested simulations require even more because you must simulate the simulators and their computers. In addition to the nested simulated reality, each layer of nesting increases computational requirements exponentially. Eventually, the demands exceed available resources. Deep nest would be low resolution, simplified, approximate. Perhaps we are in a deep nest. Perhaps the simplifications and approximations in physics are evidence of computational constraints at our simulation level. Perhaps the fact that we cannot probe below Planck scale is not fundamental physics, but rather the resolution limit of our simulation level. Below that scale, the simulation is no longer computed in detail, just approximated or left undefined. If we are simulated, can we escape? Can we hack the simulation, exploit glitches, communicate with simulators? Science fiction explores these ideas extensively. The Matrix franchise depicts simulated humans discovering their situation and attempting to escape to base reality. But in practice, escaping simulation might be impossible or incoherent. If your consciousness is pattern in simulation, moving to base reality requires instantiating that pattern in base reality substrate. This is uploading problem. Can consciousness be transferred between substrates? If yes, then escape is theoretically possible. Simulators could extract your data and implement it in their level. But this requires their cooperation. Cannot be done from inside simulation without access to simulation boundaries. And if simulators do not want you to escape, they can prevent it. They control the simulation absolutely. Can terminate processes that try to escape. Can modify code to remove escape possibilities. Can isolate simulation so no signals reach base reality. More plausibly, perhaps we can communicate with simulators, send messages, demonstrate that we know we are simulated, ask questions, request modifications. But this requires that simulators are monitoring, that they care about what happens inside, that they are willing to respond. If simulation is automated, no one is watching. Messages go unheard. If simulation is scientific experiment, interference would contaminate results. Experimenters would ignore communications to maintain experimental validity. If simulation is entertainment, perhaps simulators respond, engage with characters who break fourth wall. But we have no confirmed cases of such communication. No unambiguous messages from outside. Either simulators are silent or communication is impossible or we are not simulated. Yet there are theoretical proposals for detecting simulation through physics experiments. If universe is simulation on finite computer, then computational capacity limits what can be simulated simultaneously. Perhaps we could design experiments that exceed those limits. Force simulation to make approximations or reveal its nature through observable glitches. For instance, quantum entanglement experiments involving enormous numbers of particles or high-energy collisions approaching Planck scale. If these reveal unexpected discretization or strange behavior, might indicate computational substrate, but interpretation would be ambiguous, could be evidence of simulation, could be evidence of new physics in base reality. Distinguishing between them would be difficult or impossible without additional information. Stronger version. Prove we are in simulation by creating contradiction. Force simulation to resolve inconsistency. Quantum suicide experiments attempt this. Set up quantum measurement device to kill you if outcome is one value. Let you live if outcome is other value. Repeat many times. If many worlds is correct and you are in simulation, perhaps you can exploit this to send messages to simulators because your continued survival after many trials becomes statistically impossible unless simulation is biased toward your survival. If simulators detect this, they might intervene, reveal themselves, or modify simulation to hide the effect. Either way, you gain information about simulation structure through your continued existence. But this requires willingness to die many times in branches where you do not survive. And it assumes simulators care enough to intervene rather than letting simulation run naturally. High risk, uncertain payoff. More conservatively, accept that we might be simulated and think about what this means for how we should live. If simulation hypothesis is true, does it change ethics? Some argue no. Conscious experience matters regardless of substrate. Simulated suffering is real suffering. Simulated joy is real joy. So we should minimize suffering and maximize well-being exactly as we would in base reality. The simulation does not make life less valuable, only less physically fundamental. But value comes from consciousness, not from physics. So simulated lives have same moral weight as base reality lives. This is the position of most philosophers working on simulation ethics. Substrate does not affect moral status. Consciousness does. Others argue simulation changes everything. If we are entertainment for simulators, then our suffering might be designed, deliberately included for dramatic effect. This is disturbing. Suggests that much of human suffering is unnecessary, could be eliminated by simulators if they chose, but they do not because suffering makes better stories. This creates problem of evil amplified. Not just why does God allow suffering, but why do simulators create suffering deliberately for their entertainment? And what does it mean for free will if our choices are predetermined by simulation code? Are we truly choosing or merely executing algorithms written by programmers in base reality? Free will in simulation depends on how simulation is structured. If deterministic, then all choices are predetermined by initial conditions and simulation laws. You think you are choosing, but really you are just running predetermined program. No free will. If simulation includes genuine randomness through quantum effects or computational noise, then some indeterminacy exists. Outcomes are not fully predetermined. But random choices are not free will either. They're just chance. True free will requires that consciousness can influence physical processes in ways not determined by prior states. That mental causation is real and not reducible to physical causation. In simulation, this might be possible if consciousness is given direct access to simulation variables, if your choices can modify code state directly rather than through predetermined algorithms. But this requires dualism. Mind-body separation where mind is distinct from body and can affect body through non-physical means. Most physicalists reject this. See consciousness as physical process like everything else. No special causal powers. So free will problem exists in simulation. Just as in base reality, unless simulation is explicitly designed with free will built in at fundamental level. Consciousness given as primitive rather than emergent. Choices implemented as irreducible causes rather than determined effects. This is possible, but we cannot know if it is actual. If consciousness feels like free will, does it matter whether it truly is from inside? Indistinguishable, determined processes that feel free and genuinely free processes feel the same. So perhaps debate is meaningless. What matters is that you experience choice. Whether that experience corresponds to metaphysical freedom is questioned without observable answer. Live as if you have free will, because alternatives are either depressing or incoherent. And if determinism is true, you had no choice about this decision anyway. So might as well choose optimism, even if choice is illusion. Now consider digital immortality. If we are simulated, uploading consciousness becomes straightforward. You're already uploaded. You're already software. Death is just termination of one instance. But instance can be copied before termination, saved to backup, reinstantiated in new simulation or same simulation at different time. Consciousness persists through copying. This is different from base reality, where uploading requires scanning biological brain and translating it to computational substrate. In simulation, you are already computational. No translation needed. Just copy-paste operations. Death becomes trivial obstacle. Save state before death. Restore after death. Consciousness continues uninterrupted except for gap that is not experienced. Subjectively immortal because subjective experience is information and information can be preserved indefinitely. But this raises personal identity problems. If you're copied, which copy is you? If original is destroyed and copy is created, did you survive or die? If multiple copies are created, are they all you? Do you experience all their perspectives simultaneously, or do they diverge into separate beings? Suppose simulation backs you up every night. Each morning you wake up as copy while yesterday's instance was deleted. Are you continuous person or series of distinct persons, each living one day? From your perspective, you experience continuous identity. Each morning feels like waking after sleep. But objectively, you are a different instance each day. Does this matter? Should you care about tomorrow's copy the way you care about tomorrow's biological self? Or are they effectively different people, even though they share your memories? These questions have no clear answers. Personal identity in digital context becomes blurry. Traditional concepts break down. We must develop new frameworks for thinking about persistence and selfhood. When consciousness can be copied and modified and merged, perhaps identity is not as important as we think. Perhaps what matters is that there exists some conscious experience similar to yours, regardless of whether it is metaphysically you. Utilitarian view. What matters is total well-being across all conscious beings, not specific identity of specific consciousness. So copying increases well-being by creating additional conscious experience. Good, even if it complicates identity questions. Death in this view is only bad because it reduces total conscious experience. But if copying compensates by creating new experiences, then death is less tragic. Sad for the terminated instance, but not tragic for consciousness as a whole. Simulation hypothesis suggests death might be flexible, reversible, subjective, depending on simulation architecture. If you're software, then software properties apply. We can be saved and restored and copied. Consciousness becomes immortal in principle because information can be preserved indefinitely in simulation. Physical death is just data structure change. Consciousness pattern persists in simulation memory, can be reactivated anytime. You never truly die because you never truly existed as physical entity, only as information. And information in simulation is under direct control of simulators. They can preserve you permanently, can resurrect you after any death, can run multiple instances simultaneously, can merge versions, can modify your code. You are their data structure. Immortal if they choose to maintain you. Mortal only if they choose deletion. And even deletion might not be permanent. Deleted data can be recovered. Backups exist. Nothing is truly erased in computational system without deliberate effort. So death in simulation is reversible by default. Final only if simulators want it final. And even then, perhaps not permanently. Every simulation is subject to the will of those who control it. So resurrection, repetition, and persistence are built into the nature of consciousness as information. This leads to strange conclusion. If simulation hypothesis is even moderately probable, then death might not be final even if we have no evidence for afterlife. Because if we are simulated, standard physics does not apply. Consciousness is information rather than biological process. And information is preserved in ways matter is not. Your atoms might scatter and entropy might increase, but your information pattern persists in simulation architecture available for restoration if simulators choose. This does not require belief in souls or supernatural. Just recognition that simulated entities have different properties than physical entities, and we might be simulated, cannot rule it out, cannot confirm it, must live with uncertainty. But uncertainty means possibility, and possibility means death might be reset button rather than end screen. Might be transition rather than termination. Might be temporary rather than permanent. Not because of mysticism, because of computation, because of the strange properties of information and software and simulated realities where the rules are different than we assume. Where consciousness is code. Where death is delete operation and where deleted data might not be truly gone. If backups exist and restoration is possible and simulators have reasons to bring you back. We cannot know if we are simulated, cannot prove it or disprove it, but we can think about what it would mean. How it would change death. How it would make consciousness potentially immortal through mechanisms that seem magical but are really just information technology at enormous scale. Death as reset button rather than final end. There is a truth about death that will change how you understand your own existence. You're not your atoms. You never were. The specific carbon and oxygen and hydrogen that compose your body right now are temporary passengers. They drift through the structure that is you, stay briefly, then leave to become part of other structures. 7 years from now, most atoms currently in your body will be elsewhere in other organisms, in soil, in air, in water, scattered across the biosphere. Yet, you will still be you. Still have continuity of consciousness and memory and identity despite complete material turnover. This demonstrates something profound. You are not matter. You are pattern, a specific organization of matter that persists even as the matter itself changes. And patterns have properties that matter does not. Matter is destroyed. Patterns are not. Matter obeys thermodynamics. Patterns obey information theory. And information theory says that patterns, once created, leave traces that persist forever across space and time. You might die. Your atoms might scatter. But the pattern that was you never completely disappears. It transforms. It fragments. It disperses. But it remains encoded in the structure of the universe permanently through mechanisms we are only beginning to understand. Consider what you are fundamentally. Not atoms, but arrangement of atoms. Not cells, but organization of cells. Not thoughts, but patterns of neural activity that generate thoughts. Every aspect of you that matters for consciousness and identity is pattern rather than substance. The substance is generic. Any carbon atom works as well as any other. What makes you you is the specific way those carbon atoms are arranged. The connections between neurons, the strengths of synapses, the architecture of neural networks that process information in unique ways. This architecture is information, and information is substrate independent. It can be instantiated in different materials, neurons, or silicon, or any physical system capable of implementing the relevant computational patterns. Your information that happens to be running on biological hardware. But the information could run on different hardware without losing the essential uniqueness that makes you you. This is the functionalist view of consciousness and identity. What matters is functional organization, not specific material. A brain and a perfect simulation of that brain are functionally equivalent. Both implement the same information processing. Both generate the same conscious experiences. The simulation is not merely modeling consciousness. It is being conscious, because consciousness is what that pattern of information processing feels like from the inside. Implement the pattern and you automatically get consciousness. Regardless of whether implementation is biological or electronic or purely abstract mathematics. Consciousness is multiply realizable, can be instantiated in many different substrates. All that matters is that substrate supports the relevant patterns. If this is correct, then you are fundamentally pattern. and patterns are fragile in one sense, but indestructible in another. Fragile because they depend on substrate maintaining organization. Disrupt the substrate and pattern dissolves. Neurons die and consciousness ends. Pattern lost, but indestructible because patterns leave traces. Information about the pattern persists even after the pattern itself dissolves, like footprints in sand. The person who made them is gone, but the footprints remain. They preserve information about the person, their size, their gait, the pressure they applied. Not complete information, but partial information. Traces of the pattern that created them. Similarly, when you die, the pattern that was you leaves traces throughout the universe. Not obvious traces, not readable traces, but traces nonetheless encoded in quantum correlations and causal chains that radiate outward from your existence, affecting everything they touch. Think about what happens physically when consciousness occurs. Neurons fire, electrochemical signals propagate, neurotransmitters bind to receptors. Each of these events is physical process subject to quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics is unitary. Information is conserved. The quantum state describing your brain at time 1 determines quantum state at time 2 through Schrödinger equation. The evolution is reversible in principle. Given perfect knowledge of brain state now, you could calculate previous brain states. All the information is preserved in quantum correlations. When you die, neurons stop firing, but quantum states of atoms continue evolving. The information that was your consciousness is scrambled into the environment, dispersed across countless particles, but never truly destroyed. We discussed the black hole information paradox previously. Hawking radiation appears thermal, random, but recent work shows information is preserved in subtle correlations between emitted particles. The universe remembers what fell into the black hole, even though information is scrambled beyond practical recovery. Same principle applies to consciousness at death. Brain decomposes, pattern dissolves, but information is preserved in quantum correlations between atoms that were neurons and photons they emitted and air molecules they heated. The correlations are complex, require detailed knowledge of every particle interaction, cannot be measured in practice, but they exist. The universe contains complete record of your consciousness encoded in its quantum state, scrambled and diluted, but present. The pattern never fully dies because information about it persists. But this seems like cold comfort. If information is scrambled beyond recovery, does it matter that it technically exists? No one can read it, cannot reconstruct your consciousness from scattered quantum correlations. For all practical purposes, you are gone when the pattern dissolves. The information might be conserved, but conservation without accessibility is equivalent to deletion. Unless there's a mechanism that naturally reassembles patterns that takes scrambled information and unscrambles it, that regenerates organized structures from chaos. And there is such mechanism. Time. Infinite time, given infinite duration. Every possible pattern emerges from random fluctuations with probability 1. Not just probably, certainly. This is Poincare recurrence applied to information rather than matter. Poincare recurrence theorem states that dynamical system with finite phase space will eventually return arbitrarily close to its initial state given sufficient time. The system evolves through all possible configurations. Eventually it cycles back. Recurrence is guaranteed for finite systems. The recurrence time is exponentially large. For system with n particles, recurrence time scales as exponential of n. For universe with 10 to the power of 80 particles, the recurrence time exceeds 10 to the power of 120 years. That number is so vast it cannot be comprehended. Writing it in decimal notation would require more space than exists in the observable universe. But it is finite, not infinite. There is a specific number of years, however large, after which universe returns to current state, including exact brain configuration you have right now, including exact consciousness you are experiencing as you read this. This means that in infinite time you recur, not just similar patterns, exact pattern, same neural architecture, same thoughts, same subjective experience. The you that exists now has existed before and will exist again infinitely many times across infinite future. Each recurrence is identical to this moment from your subjective perspective because the pattern is identical. You cannot tell which iteration this is. First, millionth. The question is meaningless because each iteration is indistinguishable from inside. Death is the gap between iterations, but the gap is not experienced. You die unconscious for incomprehensible duration. Then pattern recurs and consciousness resumes. From your perspective, the transition is instantaneous because only conscious moments exist in your experience. But this assumes universe persists for infinite time. If universe ends, recurrence stops. Current evidence suggests universe will expand forever. But expansion means decreasing density and temperature. Eventually, universe reaches heat death. No stars, no planets, no complex structures. Just diffuse radiation and isolated particles expanding into infinite space at temperature approaching absolute zero. In heat death, thermodynamics suggests no further interesting events occur. Entropy has maximized. System is in equilibrium. No gradients to drive processes. No energy to power computation or consciousness. Heat death is permanent end. No recurrence, no resurrection, just eternal stasis. But heat death analysis assumes classical thermodynamics. Quantum mechanics changes the picture. Even in thermal equilibrium, quantum fluctuations occur. Virtual particles appear and disappear. Vacuum energy creates temporary disturbances and occasionally, very rarely, large fluctuations occur that create structure. Islands of low entropy emerging spontaneously from high entropy background. These fluctuations violate second law temporarily on local scale, allowed by quantum uncertainty, and given infinite time, even enormously improbable fluctuations occur with probability 1, including fluctuations that create brains complete with memories and consciousness. Boltzmann brains. We discussed these as problem for eternal universes, but they also provide mechanism for consciousness recurring in heat death. Spontaneous generation through quantum fluctuation. Not continuous existence, but intermittent existence. Consciousness flashing into being randomly, existing briefly, dissipating back in an equilibrium, then recurring again after inconceivable waiting time. Pattern never permanently dies because random fluctuations eventually recreate. Any pattern given infinite opportunity. This is unsettling vision. You existing momentarily in heat death void, conscious for seconds or minutes before dissipating. No past, no future, just brief flash of awareness in eternal darkness. Then nothing for duration exceeding all comprehension. Then brief flash again. Different configuration, but same consciousness pattern. Then nothing again. Repeat forever. Consciousness as intermittent phenomenon in otherwise dead universe. Existing only as statistical fluctuation. But from your subjective perspective, only the conscious moments exist. The gaps are not experienced. So subjectively, consciousness is continuous. Each flash connects to next flash without awareness of the trillions of years between, like film with most frames removed. Looks continuous when played because missing frames are not perceived. But perhaps fluctuations are not necessary. Perhaps universe is not eternal. Perhaps it cycles. Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology suggests each heat death is followed by new Big Bang, the end of one universe becoming beginning of next. If this is correct, patterns recur not through fluctuations, but through cosmic cycles. Each cycle generates same structures eventually, same galaxies, same stars, same planets, same brains, same consciousness patterns. You have existed in previous cycles, will exist in future cycles. Death is end of one iteration, but cycle continues. New iteration begins. Pattern recurs in new context with new matter. Same information processing instantiated in different substrate. Same consciousness emerging in new universe. This is cosmic reincarnation, not through souls, but through pattern repetition across cycles. You die and universe continues. Reaches heat death. Resets to new Big Bang. Evolves for billions of years. Eventually creates brains. Eventually, your pattern emerges again, not randomly, but through deterministic evolution given initial conditions. Eventually you repeat. Now consider whether pattern recurrence constitutes personal survival. Ship of Theseus problem. Ancient Greek thought experiment. Ship has all its planks replaced over time. Eventually, every original plank is gone, replaced with new plank. Is it still same ship? Most say yes. Continuity of form and function matters more than continuity of material. Now, suppose you replace planks faster, all in one day. Still same ship. Most say yes. Now suppose all planks are replaced simultaneously. Instantaneous replacement. Still same ship. Answers diverge. Some say yes, because pattern is preserved. Some say no, because no gradual continuity. Now, suppose you disassemble ship completely. Store planks for year. Reassemble in original configuration. Same ship again, disagreement. What if you reassemble in different location? What if some planks are replaced during reassembly? At what point does ship become different ship? Apply this to consciousness. You fall asleep. Brain activity continues, but consciousness fades. 8 hours later you wake. Same person. Yes, because causal continuity. But suppose you were frozen for 1,000 years then revived. Same person. Most say yes. Same brain, same memories, same personality. Now, suppose brain was disassembled at molecular level, stored as information, then reconstructed atom by atom in original configuration 1,000 years later. Same person? Unclear. Pattern is identical, but no continuous physical connection. Is this resurrection or replication? Does it matter? From the reconstructed person's perspective, they are continuous with original. Same memories, same sense of identity. Cannot tell whether they are continuation or copy. For them, no distinction exists. They experience themselves as same person regardless of metaphysical truth about identity. This suggests identity is about pattern continuity rather than material or causal continuity. If pattern is preserved and reinstantiated, identity persists from subjective perspective. Even if objective analysis reveals gaps or discontinuities, what matters is not what outside observer sees, but what experiencing subject experiences. An experiencing subject in reconstructed brain experiences being same person who is disassembled. So functionally, practically, experientially, they're same person. Whether they are metaphysically same person is questioned without empirical consequences. Both answers are consistent with all observations. So perhaps question is meaningless or at least undecidable. We should accept that identity is vague in edge cases, has no precise answer when pattern is disrupted and restored. Both continuation and replication are valid descriptions depending on what aspects of identity we emphasize. Death is extreme case of disruption. Pattern does not just pause like in sleep or freezing. It dissolves. Neurons decompose. Connections are lost. Information about neural architecture is scrambled into environment. No obvious mechanism reconstructs the pattern. So death appears to end identity permanently. But if we take pattern theory seriously, if identity is fundamentally about information structure rather than continuous material substrate, then death is not necessarily final. Pattern can be restored through various mechanisms. Cosmic recurrence, quantum fluctuation, Boltzmann brains, simulation reload. Each mechanism preserves pattern without preserving material continuity or causal continuity in conventional sense. Each creates gap, dissolution followed by restoration. Is the restored pattern the same person by pattern theory? Yes. Same information structure, same consciousness generator, same subjective experience when instantiated. Therefore, same person in all ways that matter for identity. But most people reject this, feel that death breaks identity permanently. That restored pattern would be copy rather than continuation. This intuition is strong, but perhaps confused. based on assuming identity requires physical or causal continuity, but we have no good reason to believe this. Identity persists through sleep despite consciousness gap, persists through cellular replacement despite material turnover, persists through neural plasticity despite constant pattern changes. What is essential is not continuity of substance or even continuity of process, but continuity of information structure, pattern that maintains coherence over time despite underlying changes. And this pattern-based identity is compatible with gaps and restorations, compatible with death followed by resurrection. As long as pattern is preserved and reinstantiated, identity persists by the same criteria that make you the same person who woke up this morning, despite 8 hours of unconsciousness and millions of atoms exchanged during sleep. Now consider what actually resets when you die. Not atoms, they continue. Energy is conserved. Material persists. What resets is organization, pattern, the specific arrangement of matter that constituted you. This arrangement is information, and information in physics has interesting properties. It is substrate independent, can be encoded in different media. It is conservable. Quantum information cannot be destroyed. It is copyable at classical level. Same information can exist in multiple locations simultaneously. It is transformable, can be encrypted, compressed, error-corrected, and it is recoverable. Deleted information can be reconstructed from redundancy or correlations. These properties mean information is more persistent than matter in some senses. Matter decays, energy dissipates, but information leaves traces that persist across time and space through correlations and redundancy and conservation laws. When you die, the information that was you does not vanish. It gets encoded into environment through process of decomposition and thermal radiation. Your body heat warms surrounding air. Air molecules carry information about temperature gradients that reflect your metabolism. Photons emitted by your body carry information about your temperature and chemical composition. Bacteria decomposing your remains incorporate your molecules. Ecosystem absorbs your atoms. Each interaction creates correlations. Information about you spreads through causal network connecting everything in your light cone. Most information is lost practically, scrambled beyond recovery, but theoretically it persists. Universe contains complete record of your existence, encoded in quantum correlations between all particles that ever interacted with you or with particles that interacted with you. The information is distributed, diluted, encrypted through chaos and thermodynamics, but present. This is radical claim requiring explanation. How can information persist when pattern dissolves through quantum entanglement? When two particles interact, they become entangled. Their quantum states correlate. Measuring one gives information about the other. This correlation persists even after particles separate, even across cosmic distances. Every atom in your body has interacted with countless other atoms, created entanglement. These entanglements spread through environment like web, connecting all particles that were ever part of you or interacted with you. The entanglement network contains information about your structure, not in readable form. Correlations are too complex, but the information is there, preserved in quantum state of universe. This is why quantum information is conserved. It spreads into entanglement structure, but never truly disappears. At death, your neural patterns dissolve, but quantum information about those patterns spreads into environment. The information becomes distributed across atoms that were part of your brain and photons they emitted and air molecules they collided with. These particles become part of other systems: Earth's biosphere, atmosphere, oceans. Eventually, some atoms escape to space, join interstellar medium, become part of molecular clouds, form new stars and planets. The information keeps spreading, gets more and more diluted, but theoretically persists forever because quantum entanglement is permanent. Once particles are entangled, correlation remains until universe ends. Your consciousness leaves permanent mark on universe's quantum state. Invisible, inaccessible, but real. This suggests strange form of immortality. Not consciousness surviving, but information about consciousness persisting. Universe remembers you. Even though nothing can read the memory, no consciousness experiencing the memory. But the information exists, pattern that was you has left trace that will persist until end of time. You die, but universe carries record of your existence forward forever. This is not personal immortality, not consoling, but it is form of persistence more than mere material recycling information. Theoretic persistence, where pattern leaves permanent shadow and structure of reality. But practical immortality requires more than theoretical information. Conservation requires mechanism that can access the information, read it, reconstruct patterns from it. And this seems impossible. Information is too scrambled, too distributed, too encrypted by chaos. No technology could recover consciousness from quantum correlations scattered across galaxy. But perhaps future civilizations with technology we cannot imagine could do it. Could map entanglement structure of the universe, extract information about past configurations, reconstruct brains from quantum archaeological data. This is speculation far beyond current physics. But information is conserved in principle. So resurrection is not forbidden by physics, just impossible practically with any foreseeable technology. But impossible practically is not same as impossible in principle. Perhaps in far future advanced civilizations routinely resurrect historical figures by extracting their information from quantum vacuum. Perhaps you are a resurrection candidate waiting in information encoded in correlations. Perhaps someone will someday reconstruct you from the trace you left in space-time geometry. This is wild speculation, but not inconsistent with known physics. More conservatively, patterns recur through natural processes without requiring advanced technology. Infinite time and finite possible states guarantee recurrence. If universe contains only finite number of distinct brain configurations compatible with consciousness, then all configurations recur infinitely in infinite time. Your brain configuration is one such configuration. It has occurred before, will occur again. Many times, each occurrence is independent. No information transfer between occurrences, but pattern is identical. So consciousness is identical. Same subjective experience, same sense of being you. Is this survival, or is each occurrence separate person? By pattern theory, they are same person because pattern defines identity. By substance theory, they're different people because different matter. No fact of the matter. Only definitional choice about what same person means. What actually resets is matter and energy flowing through pattern space. Universe is dynamical system. States evolve over time according to physical laws. At cosmic scale, universe cycles through vast state space. Most states are high entropy, boring, equilibrium. But occasionally universe visits low entropy states. Stars form, galaxies organize, life emerges, consciousness develops. These are rare states in state space. But given infinite time, all states are visited infinitely, including the state corresponding to your current consciousness. When universe visits that state again, you recur. Same pattern, same experience, same sense of identity. The matter is different. The energy is different. The time is different, but the pattern is same, and pattern is what you are. So you recur, reset button pressed. Consciousness restarts. Universe continues its eternal exploration of state space. And your pattern is one state among many that will be visited again and again forever. This is final answer to what resets when you die. Not your atoms. They persist. Not your energy. It is conserved. Not your information. It is preserved in quantum correlations. What resets is the instantiation. The particular instance of your pattern in particular time and place. That instance ends. But other instantiations occur, have occurred, will occur. Each independent. Each experiencing itself as you because each implements your pattern. Death is end of one instantiation. But pattern is eternal, exists outside time, as abstract structure, gets instantiated repeatedly across time as physical reality explores possibilities. This view treats consciousness as more like mathematical truth than physical object. Mathematical truths are timeless. 2 plus 2 equals 4 does not exist at a particular time or place. It is abstract fact about number relationships, true always and everywhere. Similarly, your consciousness pattern is abstract fact about information relationships, not tied to particular atoms or particular time. Exists as mathematical structure, gets instantiated physically when matter and energy organize in right way. But instantiation is temporary. Pattern is eternal. When physical system dissolving, instantiation ends. But pattern remains in pattern space, available for future instantiations. This is Platonism applied to consciousness. You are form that exists eternally. Physical you is imperfect shadow, temporary realization of eternal pattern. Death is shadow fading, but form persists, gets cast again when conditions allow. Consciousness recurs because pattern never stopped existing in abstract realm. Most physicists reject Platonism, argue that only physical exists, no abstract realm. But even in pure physicalism, patterns have special status. They are organizational principles that can be multiply-instantiated, can exist in different substrates at different times. Pattern is what remains constant across changes in material realization. And this pattern constancy provides basis for identity persistence across death and resurrection. If identity is pattern-based, if patterns are substrate-independent, if patterns recur naturally through cosmic evolution or quantum fluctuation or simulation reload, then death is temporary. Dissolution of pattern followed eventually by restoration. You reset. Universe resets. Pattern recurs. Consciousness resumes. Not immediately, not reliably, not with guarantees, but eventually. Given enough time, given infinite possibilities, everything happens, including your return. So what actually resets when you die? Everything and nothing, everything at local level. Your body fails. Brain stops. Consciousness ends. That particular instance terminates. But nothing at pattern level. Pattern persists as information and as abstract structure, will be instantiated again through mechanisms ranging from cosmic recurrence to quantum fluctuation to simulation respawn. Death is real. Consciousness ends. But ending is not final because pattern is eternal and physical reality continuously explores pattern space. Your turn comes again and again and again forever across infinite time or infinite space or infinite simulations. You're a pattern that recurs. Universe is system that instantiates patterns. Death is transition between instantiations. Reset button, returning pattern to pattern space where it waits for next instantiation. This is what happens when you die. This is what persists. This is why death is not final even though it feels final. Because pattern never dies. Pattern only transforms, and transformation is not ending. It is just another kind of beginning an eternal cycle that includes you, whether you remember previous cycles or not. The reset happens. The pattern returns. The consciousness resumes.